Thanks so much, Amy. And I also want to thank Sydney for really bringing us all together. This is quite an extraordinary evening of sharing. Yes, my name is Beth, and I actually have been a social worker for well over 40 years. And I just want to say a word or two about that, because when I entered graduate school, you see this gray hair is quite real. When I entered graduate school as a 21-year-old, I very quickly became passionately committed to the whole concept of uniting the entire artistic community with the human service endeavor. And I felt these two worlds had an enormous amount to give to each other, and there was a great synergy, particularly because it was the universality and the transcendence of art. I have worked in the course of my career with severely mentally disturbed people, substance abusers, homeless people. I've spent 20 years as the clinical director of a domestic violence agency, working in programs here and abroad. I've worked extensively in developing community-based programs. And I understand, particularly in the United States, that you access services as a result of the process of social labeling. I am an addict. I am mentally ill. I am disabled. Art throws that out the window and says, you know, we can transcend all of that and help us to deal with the vagaries of simply being a human being. And I have passionately felt that since I'm 21 years old, and I am, count the add 40 plus, and you can figure out that it's a unique opportunity. In addition to teaching social work, 15 years ago, while I was working at Sanctuary for Families, I had the good fortune of meeting the visionary Gibney. And we worked on developing this pilot project for movement workshops for survivors of domestic violence, and we piloted it at Sanctuary for Families. The work that Amy's talking about continues there and at multiple other domestic violence, HIV, and adolescent programs. And that's been an extraordinary event for me. I retired from Sanctuary in December 2014, and in January, as of January 2015, I had the good fortune of becoming a clinical advisor at Gibney Dance. So what do you say does a social worker do at Gibney Dance? I'm a social worker all over the world, working with varieties of populations, who technically, although we're all dancers, technically not a dancer. What do I do? Well, as Amy said, I'm involved in training dancers, particularly about domestic violence. I provide right now a variety of consultations with dancers who come to speak with me about such topics because they want to develop workshops. They want to develop workshops with survivors of domestic violence. They want to develop workshops with survivors of other forms of trauma, people who are homeless, people who are substance abusers. Last week I met with somebody who wanted to develop a workshop for people struggling with loss and grief. Someone who wanted to develop a workshop with people who are on the spectrum for autism. It goes on and on. So I can help them look at the boundaries of what they can and cannot do as dancers. And then thirdly, I'm deeply committed to working with Gibney Dance to uniting dancers with the human services community. The training that this company does, that Yasmin will speak about to others, we're creating hopefully a nonviolent sense of warriors who will fight for personal and social change, but it would be nice to bring the human service world together with dancers who are trained and committed to this kind of process. So before I talk a little bit specifically and add on to what Amy said about the nature of the workshops, I want to give you quickly two brief examples of things that were said by participants of the workshops. Actually, these took place at Sanctuary for Families, facilitated by the dancers from Gibney Dance. And it was right after a workshop with a group of West African women from Mali, Guinea, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire. And after the workshop, 45-minute workshop, we're all sitting on the floor. I was the leader of that group at the time, inviting the dancers in. And I said to everybody in the group, so it's 45 minutes have passed. How do you feel? It was a regular group meeting that they came and we had the dancers there for the group session. And one woman said, I have to be honest with all of you, I really didn't want to come today. My welfare case was closed, and as a result of my welfare case being closed wrongfully, my housing application was thrown out. I'm stuck in shelter. I've been here 6 months. I have to start all over again. I'm in such a state of despair. Why bother? And yet I came here today, and somehow or other, I don't know why, but I feel relaxed. I feel relaxed. And she was dead, and a smile across her face at the recognition that she could actually even experience just a couple of moments of relaxation as a result of that workshop. stuff. The second event is at Sanctuary we have a program what we call mentors. And those are survivors who have experienced a whole host of problems, but have received a variety of services and within a year are feeling safe living in the community and have said to us, I'd like to give back. Well, I'd like to give back. We put you through an 8-week training program, and then you become our advocates and colleagues. And we march arm in arm, and we do presentations together, and we fight for change. People tell their stories if they want to. One such person, actually, she was at the 92nd Street Y, Big Hinkle, when we were all presenting from Gibney Dance, and she read a poem about her journey through domestic violence, which was right in front of her on a piece of paper. When she finished that, she said, I need to say something to all of you that's not on this paper. My worst trauma and my dreaded nightmare happened. A week ago, I bumped into my abuser. Now, she had lived violence-free for the last year, hadn't seen this person. She bumped into him on the street. It was my worst nightmare, she said. But 2 things saved the day for me. One was Sanctuary for Families, a social service agency, taught me about safety planning, and I knew that I had to go get myself safe. But the second thing that I did to calm myself down in my speeding heart was I drew upon the breathing and relaxation exercises that I got from Gibney Dance. So that's a kind of a microcosm of the unity, the human service world and the dance world coming together for survival, personal change, and her sharing the story. I think it's very compelling, and I remember it, and I would like to share that. So, just quickly, you're talking about domestic violence. A word or two. You read it all in the press, it's in the news. You see all kinds of movies about it. Just for the sake of a definition, when we talk about domestic violence, it is a form of gender-based violence that exists in the context of intimate partner dating and family violence situations with a central dynamic of power and control. The dynamic of power and control, which is really essential. And it's manifest physically, sexually, psychologically, emotionally, economically, and in this day and age, we've got all kinds of cyber abuse and stalking that goes on. At least 1 in 4 women around the world in her lifetime will probably experience. 80 to 90% of all domestic violence that is reported is men against women. But all domestic violence is underreported. Men are victims of domestic violence, as are all many members, probably 25 to 30% in the gay and lesbian community as well. It is a universal problem that transcends race, culture, and class. So we got a big problem. And if dancers want to join in this, we certainly need to. So, if that's what domestic violence is, and it dovetails with much of what Carrie was talking about, what is it that survivors of domestic violence particularly experience? They experience a negation and violation of trust, because after all, the people that they know are the ones that have violated and abused them. They experience a loss of a sense of autonomy and control of their own space and their own self. They experience a disconnection from themselves, from their bodies, and from others. They feel stressed out. They have an inhibition in their capacity to make decisions and choices. They feel very stressed emotionally, cognitively, and otherwise. And they sometimes will express that they've lost the capacity for hope, fun, pleasure, and laughter. So if that's true, where do the workshops, particularly the workshops that we do, like Gibney Dance, fit in? As Amy said, this is not dance therapy. It's very grounded in the present and the future. And Amy gave you a bit of the examples, but I want to emphasize something about that. In terms of the expression of self, and she used the term gesture. We all make a gesture. I make a gesture. If Amy was to say to me, Beth, make a gesture that goes with your name. My name is Beth. And then if I passed the mic to Amy and I said, Amy, make a gesture. And Amy said, my name is Amy. And then I passed the mic to Yasmin. And she said, my name is Yasmin. Each one of us would have our gestures repeated by everybody around this room. And then the I statement, what's important is that our I statement would never get lost. My Beth would be repeated by each one of you. Amy's would be repeated, Yasmin's would be repeated, and we would have this collective sense of being connected to one another. The I will be is very, very powerful. And as I make this decision, I am in fact an actor, I am not acting upon. I am making a choice in time and space. The person who all of a sudden couldn't make a decision, the women shelter, 3 children can't make a decision what to make for dinner because her abuser never allowed her to make that decision. She repeatedly in workshops makes the decision. And she gets connected to herself, her body, she gets connected to a sense of community. This is very, very important. And as I said from the case examples that I gave you, her stress level goes down, she relaxes, and the sense of laughter. It's really quite extraordinary. You almost started to laugh around the Twizzlers, and the women start to laugh. They laugh, they giggle, and they have a sense of play and a sense of fun. And I think Carrie mentioned that as well, that when you're in a state of trauma and despair, you think he will never laugh again. And if we can create moments of recognition, of fun, of play, and laughter, we've created something that's very positive, because there's the memory of going back to that other capacity to imagine. There's also this notion of mastery. I make a movement in time and space. And what we know about mastery is that the repeated experience of having mastery over the environment accrues to a sense of self-esteem. It's a very powerful dynamic. And as we accrue that sense of mastery and the sense that we are capable of moving in time and space and changing personally, we are movers. We can become social movement movers. And I think we've seen from those people who participated in workshops within our little circle, who then go out in the public, who become agents of change. And I think it's interesting that we talk about movement in dance and social movements as actors committed to social change. And it's on a whole continuum. And on that note, I think I need to pass it to Yasmin Marathon, who's going to talk, who's the manager of our community action at Gibney